For Thomas "Tank" Morrison, a 45-year-old veteran of the Iraq War, rock bottom had become familiar territory. Once a decorated soldier, Tank now lived beneath a railroad bridge in rural Montana, his only possessions fitting into a worn backpack. The ghosts of his past, the addiction that followed, the family who eventually gave up on him, these were his constant companions. His sister Sarah, now a successful real estate developer, had publicly disowned him years ago after he missed their mother's funeral. "My brother died in Iraq," she told the local paper. Those words cut deeper than the Montana winter wind. But fate has a way of finding unlikely heroes in forgotten places. And on this frigid December morning, as Tank scrounged for food in the woods, destiny arrived in the form of a dying dog with impossible tags that should have rusted away decades ago. Tank knelt beside the wounded animal, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air. The German shepherd's eyes, intelligent, alert despite its injuries, followed his movements. A gunshot wound pierced its flank, still seeping blood onto the snow-covered ground. "Who did this to you, boy?" Tank whispered, gently examining the dog's injuries. The animal didn't growl or snap. Instead, it watched Tank with an almost human understanding. The tag around the dog's neck caught Tank's attention again. Wiping away blood, he read the full inscription. Project Wetcher, 1943, Subject 7. Below was a small symbol, an eagle clutching something in its talons, but not the swastika he might have expected from German military equipment of that era. This eagle held what appeared to be a medical caduceus. "That's not possible," Tank muttered. "You'd be ancient." The dog's ears perked up slightly. Tank had nothing, not even enough for his next meal. But something about the animal's eyes spoke to him. Perhaps it was recognition of a fellow survivor. Whatever the reason, Tank made his decision. "Hang on, buddy." With careful movements, he fashioned a makeshift stretcher from his tattered sleeping bag and slowly lifted the wounded animal. The dog was heavy, at least 90 pounds. And Tank's body, weakened by years of poor nutrition and hard living, protested every step as he carried his charge back toward town. The veterinary clinic was small, serving the rural community with basic care. Tank couldn't afford to take the dog inside, but he knew the dumpster behind the building often contained discarded supplies, expired medications, used bandages, items the clinic couldn't use, but that weren't entirely worthless. Settling the dog in a sheltered spot, Tank promised, "I'll be right back." 20 minutes later, he returned with his meager treasures, a half-empty bottle of antiseptic, some gauze pads, a partially used roll of bandages, and his greatest find, a small bottle of antibiotics that had only just passed their expiration date. But these scavenged supplies wouldn't be enough. Tank reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Inside was a single $20 bill, his entire worldly fortune, saved for when hunger became too much to bear. Without hesitation, he tucked the wallet away and headed into the small convenience store adjacent to the vet clinic. "Need antiseptic, clean bandages, and whatever dog food you've got for $20, he told the clerk, who eyed him suspiciously. With his supplies gathered, Tank returned to the wounded animal. "You've got a name, boy?" he asked, carefully cleaning the gunshot wound. The dog watched him, those intelligent eyes never leaving Tank's face. "Well, you've got military tags and you're sure built like a soldier. How about I call you Sergeant?" The dog's tail thumped weakly against the ground. Tank knew they couldn't stay near town. The local sheriff had run him off enough times, calling him a nuisance and a danger. An abandoned hunter's cabin he'd spotted deep in the woods would have to serve as their hospital. The journey was grueling. Tank, already weak from hunger and exposure, pushed his body to its limits, carrying the wounded animal 3 miles through dense forest. By the time they reached the dilapidated cabin, darkness had fallen. The cabin was little more than 4 walls and a partially collapsed roof, but it would provide better shelter than Tank had known in months. He cleared a space near the small fireplace, laid down his torn jacket as bedding for Sergeant, and set about building a fire with trembling hands. "Not much of a clinic," Tank said to the dog, "but it'll have to do." That night, Tank didn't sleep. He fed the fire, changed Sergeant's bandages, and coaxed the animal to drink water from his cupped hands. By morning, Tank's own hunger had become a hollow ache, but Sergeant's breathing seemed stronger. Days passed in a similar fashion. Tank ventured out only to find water and whatever food he could scavenge, offering the lion's share to Sergeant despite his own gnawing hunger. He fashioned snares from shoelaces and bits of wire, occasionally catching a rabbit or squirrel. A week into their time at the cabin, Tank returned from collecting water to find Sergeant standing shakily on all fours. "Well, look at you," Tank said, a smile breaking across his weathered face. The dog took tentative steps toward him, favoring his injured side but moving with growing confidence. Tank knelt and let Sergeant approach, offering his hand. Instead of sniffing it, As Tank expected, the dog pressed his head directly against Tank's palm in a gesture of absolute trust. "You and me, huh?" Tank said softly. "Couple of beat-up old soldiers." As Sargent healed, Tank began to notice peculiarities about his new companion. The dog refused the cheap kibble Tank had purchased, turning his nose up at it completely. Yet when Tank returned from checking his snares to find a freshly killed rabbit near the cabin door, one he hadn't caught, he realized Sargent had somehow hunted despite his injuries. "You're full of surprises," Tank told the dog. More curious was Sargent's response one evening when Tank accidentally knocked over their water container. Frustrated, Tank muttered, "Verdammt," a German curse he'd picked up from his grandfather. Sargent immediately stood at attention, head cocked, waiting. Tank stared at the dog. "You understand German?" Tentatively, Tank tried to remember other German phrases. "Sitz," he said. Immediately, Sargent sat. "Bleib." The dog remained perfectly still. "Calm." Sargent approached. Tank hadn't taught these commands. He'd never owned a dog, and his knowledge of German was limited to a few curses and phrases. Yet Sargent responded as if he'd been trained extensively in the language. "What the hell are you?" Tank whispered. As weeks passed and winter deepened, the bond between man and dog grew stronger. Tank's health improved somewhat. The necessity of caring for Sargent forced him to take better care of himself as well. He ventured into town occasionally for supplies, taking odd jobs, chopping wood or shoveling snow to earn a few dollars. It was during one of these trips that Tank encountered the first hint that their strange partnership had been noticed. "That's a mighty unusual dog you've got," said Mrs. Larson, the elderly woman whose walkway Tank was clearing of snow. "German Shepherd, isn't he? But bigger than any I've seen." Tank nodded, watching. Sargent, who sat perfectly at the edge of the property. "Yes, ma'am. He's a good boy." "Where'd you get him?" she asked. "Found him injured in the woods," Tank said simply. "We kind of found each other, I guess. My late husband was stationed in Germany after the war. He said they had dogs like that, bigger, smarter than regular German Shepherds. Military dogs." She paused. "But that was a long time ago." Tank felt a chill. "Yes, ma'am, a long time ago." That evening, as they made their way back to the cabin, Tank noticed Sargent growing increasingly agitated. The dog kept veering toward the north, away from their shelter, stopping to look back at Tank with what could only be described as impatience. "What is it, boy? Something up there?" Sargent barked once, sharply, then continued in the direction he seemed determined to go. "Home is this way," Tank said, pointing toward their cabin. Sargent whined, an almost human sound of frustration, before reluctantly following Tank. This pattern repeated over the following days. Each time they left the cabin, Sargent would try to lead Tank northward, toward the mountains that rose in the distance. Each time, Tank would redirect them, and Sargent would reluctantly comply, but with growing agitation. "What's up there that's got you so worked up?" Tank asked after a particularly insistent attempt by Sargent to change their course. The dog stared at him, those intelligent eyes seeming to hold secrets. The mystery deepened when Tank noticed Sargent performing perimeter checks around their cabin each night. Systematic patterns of movement that mimicked military security protocols Tank recognized from his own training. The dog wasn't just smart, he was trained in tactical operations. One night, Tank awoke to find Sargent standing rigid at the cabin door, a low growl emanating from deep in his chest. "What is it?" Tank whispered, reaching for the hunting knife he kept nearby. Seconds later, he heard the crunch of footsteps in the snow outside. Someone was approaching the cabin. Tank moved silently to the window, peering through a crack in the wooden boards. In the moonlight, he could make out two figures moving toward the cabin. Their methodical approach and the way they communicated with hand signals identified them as professionals, military or paramilitary. "Back," Tank whispered to Sargent, who immediately retreated to the shadows beside him. The men outside paused about 20 yards from the cabin. One raised what appeared to be a scanning device, sweeping it across the structure. They conferred briefly then, to Tank's surprise, turned and disappeared back into the forest. Tank remained frozen by the window until the sounds of their departure faded. "Who the hell were they?" he muttered. Sargent whined softly, pressing against Tank's leg. "They were looking for something," Tank said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Or someone." The encounter left Tank uneasy. His instincts, honed by years in combat zones, told him they were in danger. Whatever Sargent was, whatever the strange tag around his neck meant, someone was interested enough to send trained operatives into the woods in the dead of winter. "Maybe we should see what's got you so worked up in those mountains," Tank conceded. "Better than waiting for those guys to come back." Sargent's ears perked up, as if he understood perfectly. The following morning, Tank packed what few supplies they had. Their journey north took them deeper into the wilderness, away from the scattered homes and businesses that made up the small Montana town. Sargent moved with increasing confidence, no longer simply heading north but following what appeared to be a specific path. The dog would stop occasionally, sniffing the air or ground. It was as if he was following markers invisible to Tank. By midday, they reached the foothills of the mountain range. Here, Sargent paused, looking back at Tank expectantly. "Still going up?" Tank asked, catching his breath. The dog gave a short bark and continued forward. The path grew steeper, and Tank's military-honed fitness had deteriorated during his years of homelessness and substance abuse. His lungs burned with each breath of the thin mountain air. "Not all of us have 4 legs, you know," Tank muttered during one such break. As the afternoon wore on, clouds gathered overhead, threatening snow. Tank checked their supplies with concern. They had enough for perhaps 2 days if they were careful. If they became stranded in a storm, things would get dangerous quickly. "We might need to turn back soon, boy," Tank told Sargent as the first snowflakes began to fall. Sargent whined, an almost pleading sound, and pushed forward with renewed determination. Something in the dog's demeanor, a desperation Tank hadn't seen before, convinced him to continue despite his misgivings. The snow began falling more heavily, reducing visibility to mere yards. Tank followed Sargent closely, trusting the animal's senses to guide them. The temperature dropped rapidly as darkness approached. "We need to find cover," Tank called to Sargent over the rising wind. "There's got to be something, a cave, an overhang, anything." Sargent barked sharply and veered to the right, away from the path they'd been following. Tank followed, pushing through dense underbrush until they emerged in a small clearing. There, partially hidden by pine trees and years of growth, stood a small wooden structure. "A ranger station?" Tank wondered aloud, approaching cautiously. The building was old but solidly constructed, its windows boarded over, its door secured with a heavy padlock. Tank examined the lock, rusted but still functional. Using a rock, he brought it down hard on the lock mechanism. After several blows, the lock broke apart, and the door swung open with a protesting creak. Inside, dusty furniture and equipment suggested the station had been abandoned for decades. A desk, a few chairs, a wood stove, and shelves lined with ancient supplies greeted them. Tank quickly gathered wood from a pile near the stove and set about making a fire. Sargent prowled the small space, sniffing intently at the floorboards and walls. "Make yourself at home," Tank told him, coaxing flames from the dry kindling. "We're not going anywhere until this storm passes." As warmth began to fill the cabin, Tank explored their temporary refuge more thoroughly. The supplies on the shelves were military rations, K-rations from World War II by the look of them, long expired. A map on the wall showed the surrounding mountains, with markings Tank didn't recognize. What was the military doing all the way out here? He wondered aloud. Sargent had settled by a particular section of the floor and was pawing insistently at one of the boards. Tank knelt beside him, running his hands over the area. There was something different about these boards. They fit too perfectly, with none of the warping the others showed after decades of Montana winters. "What have you found, boy?" Tank pressed experimentally on the boards. Nothing happened. He examined the edges more carefully and noticed a slight depression in one corner. When he pressed it, he heard a faint click. The section of flooring, about 3 feet square, shifted slightly. "Hidden compartment?" Tank lifted the false floor section, revealing a small metal box and a leather-bound book. The box was locked, but the book was secured only with a leather strap. Tank opened it carefully, revealing pages of handwritten German. What the hell? Though Tank couldn't read the text, he recognized the dates noted in the margins. 1943, 1944, 1945, World War II. Flipping through the pages, he found technical drawings, what appeared to be medical diagrams of dogs, specifically German Shepherds, with annotations and measurements. One page held a photograph paperclipped to the margin. It showed a group of German Shepherds standing at attention, each bearing a tag like the one Sargent wore. Behind them stood men in a mixture of American and German military uniforms, an impossible collaboration during wartime. Tank looked from the photograph to Sargent, who watched him intently. "These dogs, they look exactly like you," Sargent whined softly. Setting the book aside, Tank turned his attention to the metal box. It was secured with a simple combination lock, 3 numbered dials. On a hunch, Tank tried the numbers from Sargent's tag, 743. With a satisfying click, the box opened. Inside lay a folded map, more detailed than the one on the wall, and a small leather case containing a key. The map showed the same mountain range, but with specific markings converging on a single location marked with a symbol that matched the one on Sargent's tag, the eagle with the caduceus. "Is this where you've been trying to take me?" Tank asked, showing the map to Sargent. The dog's ears perked up, and he gave a short bark. Tank studied the map more carefully. The marked location was perhaps another day's journey deeper into the mountains. What was there that had Sargent so determined to reach it? And who were the men he'd seen at the cabin? Were they looking for Sargent, for this hidden cache of documents, or for whatever lay at the destination marked on the map? As Tank pondered these questions, he became aware of Sargent's renewed agitation. The dog was at the door, growling softly. Tank extinguished the lantern and moved quietly to the window, peering through a gap in the boards. Through the swirling snow, he could make out flashlight beams moving among the trees. The men from the cabin had followed them. Back from the door, Tank whispered to Sargent. Tank gathered their discoveries, the book, the map, the key, and stuffed them into his pack. Then he quickly scattered the remaining ashes in the stove and grabbed their few supplies. A quick search revealed a trapdoor leading to a small cellar. From there, a narrow tunnel, likely an emergency escape route, led away from the cabin. Tank and Sargent squeezed through, emerging about 50 yards downhill, concealed by dense underbrush. Through the trees, Tank could see flashlights converging on the cabin they'd just abandoned. 3 men in dark tactical gear approached the structure cautiously. "Time to go," Tank whispered to Sargent. They traveled through the night, the storm eventually subsiding to reveal a clear, star-filled sky. The temperature plummeted, but Tank kept them moving, following the map by moonlight. Sargent seemed to know exactly where they were headed, often leading Tank back to the correct path when he strayed. By dawn, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm Tank. They found shelter beneath an outcropping of rock, huddled together for warmth. Tank studied the map and journal during their break, wishing he could read German to understand what the documents revealed. "Whatever's up in these mountains," he told Sargent, "someone wants it badly enough to track us through a blizzard. I'm guessing it has something to do with that tag you're wearing." Sargent lay his head on Tank's lap. They resumed their journey by mid-morning. According to the map, they were nearing their destination. The terrain grew more rugged, the path narrower as it wound between towering rock formations. Sargent grew increasingly alert, his posture tense with anticipation. Tank found himself checking their surroundings constantly, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched. Around midday, they rounded a bend in the path, and Tank stopped short. Ahead, nestled against the mountainside, was what appeared to be an entrance to a mine, weathered timber framing a dark opening. But unlike the abandoned mines Tank had seen before, this one showed subtle signs of maintenance. The area around the entrance was clear of the debris one would expect after decades of mountain winters. "Is this it?" Tank asked, looking at Sargent. The dog moved forward purposefully, stopping at the entrance and looking back expectantly. Tank approached cautiously, examining the timbers. Despite their weathered appearance, they were structurally sound. Near the entrance, partially concealed by a rock, he found a small metal panel with a keyhole. The key from the ranger station, Tank realized, pulling it from his pack. He inserted the key into the lock and turned it. Nothing happened for a moment. Then he heard the distinct hum of electrical equipment activating, impossible for a truly abandoned site. A section of the rock wall beside the mine entrance slid aside, revealing a modern metal door with a keypad. Sargent immediately moved to the keypad and pawed at it insistently. "You know the code?" Tank asked incredulously. The dog barked once, continuing to paw at the keypad. Tank examined it carefully. Unlike modern keypads with numbers 09, this one had only 7 keys, each marked with a different symbol. One of them matched the eagle and caduceus on Sargent's tag. "Worth a shot," Tank muttered, pressing that key. The panel beeped once, and a small screen lit up with the message. "Subject number?" "Subject number." Tank recalled Sargent's tag. "Subject 7." He looked for a key marked with the number 7, but instead found one with the German word Sieben. He pressed it. The panel beeped again. Zugangsbestätigung erforderlich. Access confirmation required. Tank didn't know what to do next, but Sargent did. The dog placed his tag directly against the panel. A red light scanned the tag, and the screen changed. Zugang Jewert. Willkommen zurück. Subject 7. Access granted. Welcome back. Subject 7. The heavy metal door slid open silently, revealing a well-lit corridor extending into the mountain. The contrast between the rugged mine entrance and the pristine hallway beyond was jarring. "What the hell is this place?" Tank whispered. Sargent entered without hesitation, looking back as if to say, "Follow me." Taking a deep breath, Tank stepped through the doorway. The door slid closed behind them with a soft hiss, sealing them inside. The corridor was illuminated by recessed lighting that activated as they moved forward, giving the impression of the facility awakening from hibernation. The walls were smooth concrete, unmarked except for occasional directional signs in both German and English. The air was cool and remarkably fresh for an underground facility, suggesting a sophisticated ventilation system. Sargent moved with absolute confidence, leading Tank deeper into the complex. They passed several closed doors before arriving at what appeared to be a central junction. Here, a large map displayed on the wall showed the layout of the facility: extensive living quarters, laboratories, storage areas, and what was labeled as Command Center. "This place is massive," Tank muttered. "How has no one found it?" Sergeant continued forward, heading in the direction marked Command Center. Tank followed, increasingly aware that they were likely not alone in the facility. The Command Center doors slid open automatically as they approached. Inside was a scene straight out of a 1940s military installation, but in pristine condition: banks of equipment, map tables, communications gear, all apparently functional despite being nearly 80 years old. On the central table lay a folder stamped with the now familiar eagle and caduceus symbol and the words, "Project Wetcher, Project Guardian." Tank opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside, he found documents in English, likely translations of the original German files. The first page bore the heading Joint Allied German Special Research Initiative and was dated March 1943. In response to the defection of Dr. Elizabeth Weber and her research team from the German Lebensborn program, a special joint initiative has been established on American soil to continue their groundbreaking work in biological life extension and enhanced canine intelligence. Due to the sensitive nature of this research and its potential implications for post-war military applications, this facility has been established with the highest security classification. Tank looked up from the document to Sergeant, who sat watching him intently. "Life extension?" Tank whispered. "Enhanced intelligence?" He continued reading. Dr. Weber and her team had been conducting research on extending the lifespan of German Shepherds bred for military service, while simultaneously enhancing their intelligence to near-human levels. The research had shown tremendous promise, with test subjects demonstrating dramatically extended lifespans and cognitive abilities far beyond normal canine capacity. But the most shocking revelation came near the end of the file. The canine subjects have demonstrated lifespans exceeding 80 years while maintaining physical prime for approximately 65 years. Subject 7 has shown the most promising results, with cognitive abilities approaching lower human thresholds and complete retention of training protocols even after decades of dormancy. Tank looked at Sergeant with new understanding. "You're not just named after a military dog," he said softly. "You are a military dog. From World War II. Further pages revealed that the research hadn't been limited to dogs. A separate section detailed experiments conducted on human volunteers, a select group of scientists and soldiers who had received experimental life extension treatments. Human trials have demonstrated similar success rates to canine subjects, with test group members showing no signs of aging beyond normal parameters since initial treatment in 1944. Dr. Weber, now chronologically 72, physiologically 37, continues to monitor the program with no detectable degradation in cognitive or physical function. The document was dated 1978, 35 years after the program began. "They're still alive," Tank whispered. "They're all still alive." As if in response to his realization, a voice came from behind him, heavily accented, female, authoritative. "Not all of us, but yes, some have survived." Tank whirled around. In the doorway stood an elderly woman, though elderly didn't quite capture her appearance. Despite white hair and lined features, she stood straight-backed and moved with the fluidity of someone much younger. Behind her were two men of similar age but equally incongruous vitality. Sergeant immediately approached the woman, tail wagging, all signs of his earlier urgency gone. She knelt, her movements graceful despite her apparent age, and stroked his head. "Good boy, Sieben," she said softly. "You've brought him, just as we hoped." "Thomas Morrison," she said. "We've been waiting for you." Tank's mind reeled. "How do you know my name?" The woman smiled slightly. "We know much about you, Tank." She paused. "My name is Dr. Elizabeth Weber. According to conventional chronology, I am 128 years old. These are my colleagues, Captain Erich Muller, formerly of the German Army, and Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison of the United States Army." She gestured to the men behind her. Mueller, tall and austere with the rigid posture of a lifetime soldier. Harrison, shorter but powerfully built, with a distinctly American air despite his antiquated military bearing. "Welcome to Project Guardian," Dr. Weber continued. "We've been waiting a very long time for someone like you." Tank stared at the three figures before him, his mind struggling to accept what his eyes were seeing. These people should be long dead, yet here they stood, aged but vital, speaking of World War II as if it were recent history. "This isn't possible," Tank said finally. "You're claiming to be over 100 years old?" Dr. Weber nodded. I was born in Munich in 1906. I earned my medical degree in 1930, specializing in genetics and longevity research. By 1939, I was heading a research division within the Lebensborn program, though my interests were purely scientific, never ideological. She moved into the room with surprising grace, seating herself at the central table. "Please, sit. You must have questions, and we have much to explain." Tank remained standing, looking to Sergeant, or Sieben, as they called him, for some reassurance. "You defected," Tank said, recalling the documents he'd read. "You were working for the Nazis, but you defected to the Americans." "Yes," Dr. Weber confirmed. By 1943, it had become clear to me and several of my colleagues that the Reich was doomed, and more importantly, that the ideology was monstrous. My research was being perverted for horrific purposes. She paused, old pain flickering across her features. "We made contact with American intelligence and arranged our extraction, bringing our research with us." Captain Mueller spoke up, his German accent thicker than Weber's. "I was her security escort, originally SS, but I had seen enough to know we were on the wrong side. I helped get her and her team to Switzerland, where the Americans picked us up." "And your research?" Tank asked. "These documents talk about life extension, enhanced intelligence in dogs." "The research was genuine," Dr. Weber said. "The Nazi regime was pursuing multiple avenues to create their 1,000-year Reich and their superior beings. My team was exploring legitimate scientific approaches to extending human lifespan and enhancing cognitive function. When we realized how our work would be weaponized, we chose to bring it to the Americans, who were happy to continue it." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison spoke for the first time, his accent purely American Midwest despite the decades. "It was the middle of a world war, son. The potential military applications were significant, but more importantly, the Americans understood that this research needed to be protected from all sides." "What do you mean?" "The serum we developed," Dr. Weber explained, "could potentially extend human lifespan to 200 years or more, while maintaining physical prime until the final decade. The implications for humanity are complicated." "Complicated?" Tank repeated. "Consider a world where only the wealthy and powerful can access such treatment," Captain Mueller said grimly. "Dictators who live for centuries, billionaires who accumulate wealth and power across multiple lifetimes. The potential for abuse is immense. That's why this facility was established," Harrison added. Tank looked around the command center, taking in the decades-old technology that somehow still functioned. "You've been here all this time? Since the 1940s? "Not continuously," Dr. Weber said. "For the first few decades, we operated with the knowledge and support of a small division within the American government. But administrations changed, priorities shifted, and eventually, our project was officially decommissioned in 1972. Only we weren't," Harrison continued. "By then, we had become independent. The treatments had worked. We weren't aging normally. We couldn't just be retired and forgotten. We were living proof of what the serum could do." "So a decision was made," Dr. Weber said. "The facility would officially cease to exist. Records were destroyed or classified beyond reach. Those of us who had received the treatments, who were committed to protecting the research, would continue our work in secret." "How many of you were there?" Tank asked. "Originally, 23, Captain Mueller answered. 12 scientists, 11 military personnel. Now, just the 3 of us remain. The others? Some chose to leave," Dr. Weber said quietly, "to live normal lives, accepting that they would eventually age and die like anyone else. The serum extends life, but it isn't immortality. It must be re-administered periodically. Without maintenance doses, the effects gradually diminish." "Others were eliminated," Captain Mueller added grimly. "Over the decades, various organizations have learned fragments of truth about our work. There have been attempts to infiltrate or attack this facility. Like the men who followed us here," Tank realized. Harrison nodded. "We've been monitoring their movements for weeks. They work for a private military contractor called Nexus Strategic, though they're really just mercenaries for whoever's paying them." "And who's paying them?" Tank asked. The 3 exchanged glances before Dr. Weber answered. "A consortium of wealthy individuals who've learned of our research. They call themselves the Continuity Initiative, a bland name for a group seeking to obtain immortality for themselves and control over who else might receive it." Tank's head was spinning with the implications. "And Sergeant Sieben, how does he fit into all this?" Dr. Weber's expression softened as she looked at the dog. "Sieben was part of our original research program. The canine subjects were bred specifically for intelligence and physical capability, then enhanced through a variation of the same serum used on humans. They were intended to be guardians and companions. partners who could live as long as their enhanced human handlers. There were originally 12 dogs in the program, Harrison added. Sieben is the last. He escaped during a security breach 3 weeks ago, Captain Mueller explained. We believe he was shot by one of the Nexus operatives who had infiltrated our perimeter. We feared we had lost him until we detected his tracking implant moving again with you. Tracking implant? Tank looked at Sargent with new eyes. A subcutaneous chip placed decades ago, Dr. Weber explained. It allows us to monitor his location and vital signs. So you've been watching us, Tank said. You knew where we were, that I found him and helped him. Yes, Dr. Weber admitted, and we observed how you cared for him despite having nothing yourself. It confirmed what Sieben already sensed about you. What do you mean? Harrison leaned forward. The dogs in the program had enhanced intelligence, but also enhanced intuition, almost a sixth sense about people. Sieben didn't find you by accident, son. He was searching for a successor. Tank stared at him. A successor? For what? For us. Dr. Weber said simply, for the Guardians. We are old, Mr. Morrison, not physically, but in our souls. We have carried this burden for nearly 80 years. It is time to pass it on. Why me? Tank asked, a note of desperation in his voice. I'm nobody, a homeless vet with PTSD and a drinking problem. I couldn't even keep my family together. On the contrary, Captain Mueller said firmly, you are exactly who we need. Someone with military training and tactical knowledge. Someone with a strong moral core, evidenced by your willingness to sacrifice for Sieben when you had nothing to give, and most importantly, someone with nothing left to lose. The words hit Tank like a physical blow. Nothing left to lose. Wasn't that the truth? His family had disowned him, his health was deteriorating, his future non-existent. There's more you need to understand, Dr. Weber said, her tone grave. Sieben led you here not just because we need a successor, but because time is running out. She rose and moved to a computer terminal that looked like something from the 1980s, but clearly still functioned. With a few keystrokes, she brought up a satellite image on the main screen. Tank recognized the mountain range they were in, but the image was overlaid with survey markers and development plans. This is what the Continuity Initiative has planned for these mountains, Dr. Weber explained. A renewable energy project is their cover story. In reality, they're preparing to excavate the entire area, searching for this facility. Tank studied the image. How did they find out about this place? Leaks over decades, Harrison said. Former government officials selling secrets, old documents discovered, whispers and rumors followed up with enormous resources. They don't know exactly where we are, but they've narrowed it down to this mountain range. And they're willing to tear it apart to find you, Tank concluded. Why not just relocate? Take your research and go somewhere else? Dr. Weber shook her head. It's not that simple. The serum requires a specific mineral compound found only in these mountains. There's a reason this facility was built here, Mr. Morrison. Without access to this mineral, no more serum can be produced. How much do you have left? Tank asked. Enough for perhaps 50 complete treatment courses, Captain Mueller answered. A finite supply that cannot be replenished if the facility is compromised. And what happens if these people, this Continuity Initiative, get their hands on it? Dr. Weber's expression darkened. The serum would become the most valuable substance on Earth. Wars would be fought over it. Power structures would be permanently altered. Imagine dictators and tyrants who rule not for decades but for centuries. Corporate leaders who control global resources for multiple lifetimes. The world's wealthiest extend their influence across generations while the rest of humanity continues to age and die normally. The very scenarios we've dedicated our lives to preventing, Harrison added. I still don't understand why you think I'm the answer, Tank said. What can one homeless vet do against what sounds like a well-funded private army? You have qualities they lack, Captain Mueller said. Honor, sacrifice, the ability to put others before yourself. And there's something else, Dr. Weber added, her expression softening. Something we discovered when analyzing your blood from when you treated Sieben's wounds. The genetic markers we look for in potential serum recipients, the indicators for optimal compatibility, you don't have them. What does that mean? It means the serum wouldn't work on you, Dr. Weber explained gently. Your particular genetic profile, combined with the injuries you sustained in Iraq and the neurochemical changes from your PTSD, render you immune to the life-extending effects. So I couldn't become like you, Tank said. I couldn't live for centuries. Exactly, Harrison said. And that makes you perfect. You cannot be corrupted by the temptation of immortality because it is not an option for you. Your decisions will be based solely on what's right, not on self-preservation or personal gain. Tank felt a strange mixture of emotions. Disappointment at being told immortality was beyond his reach, but also a curious relief. What exactly are you asking me to do? Tank asked finally. The three Guardians exchanged glances before Dr. Weber answered. "We need your help to protect the facility from immediate threat," she said. "The Nexus operatives who followed you, they're just the advance team. More will come. And in the longer term," Captain Mueller continued, "we need someone to help us implement our contingency plan. The facility cannot remain here indefinitely. The mineral supplies are nearly exhausted, and the continuity initiative grows closer each day. We need to relocate the essential research and remaining serum supply," Harrison explained. "Establish a new, secure location where the work can continue under proper guardianship." "And you think I'm qualified for this?" Tank asked. "More than qualified," Dr. Weber said with unexpected warmth. "Sieben chose you, Mr. Morrison. In 80 years, he has never been wrong about people." Tank looked at Sergeant Sieben, who had been watching the entire exchange with those uncannily intelligent eyes. "There's something else you should know," Dr. Weber said, hesitating in her voice for the first time. "Something about your family. My family wants nothing to do with me. Your sister Sarah," Dr. Weber continued carefully. "She works for Vermilion Development Group, yes?" Tank nodded, surprised. "She's their regional director." "Why?" Dr. Weber touched the computer terminal again, bringing up a new image, a corporate organizational chart. Vermilion Development is a subsidiary of Nexus Holdings, which also owns Nexus Strategic, the mercenary group tracking you, and Nexus Holdings is controlled by the Continuity Initiative. "You're saying my sister works for the people trying to find this place. That's just a coincidence." "I'm afraid it's not," Dr. Weber said gently. "Your sister's company has been specifically contracted to acquire this mountain range and oversee the renewable energy project that will serve as cover for their search." "That's still not proof of anything," Tank insisted. "Sarah probably has no idea who she's really working for or what they're looking for." "There's more," Dr. Weber said. "Your father, General Morrison, he knew about Project Guardian." Tank felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. "What? That's impossible. My father was a Pentagon bureaucrat. He pushed papers." "Your father was part of a small oversight group that maintained contact with this facility into the 1980s, Harrison said. "He was one of the few people who knew we still existed after the official decommissioning." "You're lying," Tank said flatly. "My father died 10 years ago. If he knew about all this, why wouldn't he have told me?" The three Guardians were silent for a moment before Dr. Weber spoke again. "Because he was preparing you to take his place," she said quietly. "He was grooming you to become a Guardian." "That's absurd," Tank snapped. "My father and I barely spoke after I enlisted. He opposed my deployment to Iraq. He thought I was wasting my potential." "He opposed your deployment because he knew where your true purpose lay," Captain Mueller said. "He had other plans for your military training." "Your father was our last official contact with the outside world," Harrison added. "When he died, we lost our final connection to the government that once supported us. We've been completely on our own since then." Tank's mind was reeling. Could it be true? Had his father known about this place? "I don't believe you," Tank said. Dr. Weber sighed. "I understand your skepticism, but perhaps this will convince you." She reached into a drawer and withdrew a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. "Your father left this with us, to be given to you if you ever found your way here." Tank took the envelope with trembling hands. His name was written on the front in his father's unmistakable handwriting. He broke the seal and withdrew a single page, dated just weeks before his father's death. "Tank," it began. "If you're reading this, then Sieben has found you, just as I always believed he would. Everything Dr. Weber and the others have told you is true. I've been part of Project Guardian since before you were born. My father before me served as liaison, and his father was among the original American officers who helped establish the facility in 1943. I wanted to tell you so many times. I tried to guide you toward this purpose without revealing the secret I was sworn to protect. Perhaps that was a mistake. Perhaps I should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning. The work being done at the facility is of vital importance to humanity's future. The Guardians need someone like you, someone with training, courage, and the moral compass to make impossible choices. I've watched you struggle since Iraq, and it has broken my heart. But I also knew that these struggles were forging you into the person who could take up this mantle. I'm sorry for the distance between us. I'm sorry for the pain you've endured. But I have never stopped believing in you, son. You were always meant for something greater than you knew. Trust Sieben, trust the Guardians, and most of all, trust yourself. With love and faith, Dad." Tank stared at the letter, his father's words blurring as tears filled his eyes. "He knew," Tank whispered. "All this time, he knew." "Yes," Dr. Weber said gently, "and he believed in you, even when you didn't believe in yourself." Tank looked up from the letter to find Sieben had moved to his side, the dog's steady presence offering silent support. He placed a hand on the animal's head. "What about Sarah?" Tank asked finally. "Does she know about any of this?" "We don't believe so," Harrison answered carefully. but her position makes her valuable to the Continuity Initiative. They're using her company as a front for their operations in this area. She's in danger, Tank realized. If she's unknowingly helping these people, what happens when she's no longer useful to them? A valid concern, Captain Mueller acknowledged. The Continuity Initiative is not known for leaving loose ends. Tank folded his father's letter and tucked it into his pocket. His mind was still processing everything he'd learned, but one thing was becoming clear. He couldn't walk away from this. Not now. "What's your plan?" he asked. "You said you have a contingency for relocating the facility." Dr. Weber nodded, relief visible on her face at his implicit acceptance of their situation. "We've identified a location in Alaska, remote, defensible, and with similar geological properties to this mountain range. There's enough of the mineral compound there to continue producing the serum on a limited scale. The challenge," Harrison added, "is transferring the equipment, research, and remaining serum supply without the Continuity Initiative intercepting us." "How long do we have?" Tank asked. "Vermilion Development has scheduled their initial survey team to arrive in 5 days," Dr. Weber answered. "Once they begin their work, it will be nearly impossible to move our equipment undetected." 5 days, Tank repeated. "To evacuate a facility that's been here for 80 years. That's not much time. We've already prepared much of the essential equipment and research for transport," Captain Mueller said. "But the most critical component, the serum itself and the means to produce it, requires special handling and security." "And that's where I come in?" Tank guessed. "Yes," Dr. Weber confirmed. "Your military training, combined with Sieben's capabilities, makes you ideally suited to help secure our evacuation. And perhaps more importantly, to help us determine what to do about your sister and her unwitting involvement." Tank nodded slowly, his decision crystallizing. Whether or not he fully believed everything they'd told him, he couldn't ignore the danger to Sarah. And somewhere deep inside, a part of him that had been dormant since Iraq was awakening, the part that needed a mission, a purpose beyond mere survival. "I'll help you," he said finally, "but I need to know everything about the facility, about the Continuity Initiative, about my father's involvement. No more secrets." "Agreed," Dr. Weber said. "We'll share everything we know. And Sarah," Tank added firmly, "whatever happens, we protect her." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation and planning. Tank immersed himself in the history and operations of Project Guardian, absorbing decades of research and security protocols. Dr. Weber guided him through the scientific aspects. Captain Mueller covered tactical considerations, and Lieutenant Colonel Harrison shared the administrative and logistical details of their planned relocation. The facility was more extensive than Tank had initially realized. 3 levels carved into the mountain, with laboratories, living quarters, storage areas, and power systems that had functioned independently for decades. Most impressive was the small manufacturing center where the life extension serum was produced, utilizing the rare mineral compound found in the surrounding rock. "The mineral has unique properties," Dr. Weber explained. "It contains elements not found anywhere else on Earth in this specific combination. We believe it may be extraterrestrial in origin, perhaps from a meteorite impact millions of years ago." "And you've narrowed the world down to just 2 locations where this mineral exists? Here in Alaska?" "After decades of searching, yes," Dr. Weber confirmed. "The Alaskan site was discovered in the 1970s, but establishing a facility there was deemed too risky while this one remained secure." "Until now," Tank observed. "Until now," she agreed soberly. As Tank learned more about the serum itself, he was struck by both its potential and its limitations. The formula didn't grant true immortality. Recipients still aged, but at a dramatically reduced rate, and they remained in their physical prime for decades longer than normal. They weren't immune to injury or disease, though their recovery capabilities were enhanced. "Without regular re-administration, the effects gradually diminish," Dr. Weber explained. "One could choose to stop taking it and return to a normal aging process." "Has anyone ever done that?" Tank asked. A shadow crossed her face. "A few. Some found the burden of watching the world change while they remained the same too heavy to bear. Others developed ethical concerns about their continued use of a limited resource." "What happened to them?" "They aged and died, like anyone else," she said simply. Tank thought about this as he helped with the evacuation preparations. The serum represented an extraordinary scientific achievement, but it also posed profound ethical questions. Who deserved such a gift? How would society change if lifespans were radically extended? And who should make these decisions? On the evening of the second day, as Tank was reviewing evacuation routes with Captain Mueller, an alarm sounded throughout the facility. "Perimeter breach," Mueller announced, moving swiftly to a security terminal. Multiple intruders approaching from the south access point. Harrison joined them moments later. "Nexus operatives?" "Most likely," Mueller confirmed, studying the thermal imaging on the screen. 6 individuals, tactical formation, approaching the secondary entrance. They found us sooner than expected, Harrison said grimly. We need to accelerate the evacuation. Dr. Weber entered, her expression tense. How much time do we have? The secondary entrance has multiple security layers, Mueller answered. It will take them hours to breach, even with specialized equipment. But once they confirm the facility's location, they'll call for reinforcements. Then we move tonight, Weber decided. Mr. Morrison, are you ready? Tank nodded, though his heart raced at the prospect of confronting trained operatives. Despite years of homelessness and substance abuse, his military training remained ingrained. The past 2 days had reawakened muscle memory and tactical thinking he thought he'd lost. What about Sarah? He asked. We've been monitoring communications, Harrison said. The survey team, including your sister, is scheduled to arrive tomorrow morning. These operatives are advanced security preparing the area. Then we need to intercept Sarah before she reaches them, Tank insisted. The Guardians exchanged glances before Weber nodded. You're right. We can't allow civilian casualties, especially someone connected to you. We'll adjust the plan. Over the next hour, they finalized their strategy. The most critical research materials and serum supplies would be transported via an emergency evacuation tunnel that exited the mountain several miles from the main facility. Meanwhile, Tank and Sieben would attempt to intercept Sarah before she reached the Nexus operatives. Take this, Dr. Weber said, handing Tank a small device that resembled a satellite phone. It's a secure communication link. We'll be able to coordinate even when separated. Captain Mueller provided Tank with tactical gear and, after some hesitation, a handgun. For emergencies only, he stressed. What about you three? Tank asked. The evacuation tunnel isn't large enough for vehicles. How will you transport everything? We have a contingency for that, Harrison said with a slight smile. One of the advantages of operating for decades is the ability to establish hidden resources. There's a truck cached at the tunnel exit, with everything we need for the journey to Alaska. As they made final preparations, Tank found himself alone with Dr. Weber in the main laboratory. There's something you haven't told me, he said. Something about my father. What makes you say that? The way you all talk about him. It's not just that he knew about this place or that he was your government contact. There's something more. Your father was offered the serum. Tank stared at her. What? In 1984, when your father first became our liaison, we offered him the opportunity to join us as a guardian. He was an ideal candidate, dedicated, ethical, with the right genetic markers for optimal compatibility. But he refused, Tank guessed, thinking of his father who had aged and died like any normal man. Not exactly, Dr. Weber said carefully. He accepted a modified version of the treatment, one that extended his life by perhaps 15 years beyond his natural span, but not the full protocol that would have kept him in his prime for decades. Tank processed this revelation. So he should have died in his 60s, but he made it to his 80s. Yes, he wanted more time to guide you, to see you become the man he believed you could be. But he didn't want the full burden of guardianship. He believed that role might eventually fall to you. Did my mother know? Tank asked quietly. Dr. Weber shook her head. Only about his extended lifespan, not its source. He told her it was an experimental cancer treatment after his diagnosis. In a way, it was. This new information cast Tank's relationship with his father in a different light. The distance between them that Tank had attributed to disappointment might instead have been his father's struggle to keep this monumental secret while still trying to prepare him for an inheritance he couldn't reveal. Why are you telling me this now? Tank asked. Because you deserve to know the full truth before you commit to helping us, Dr. Weber replied. And because it helps explain why we believe you're the right person for this role. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from Captain Mueller. The intruders have breached the first security layer. We need to move now. The evacuation plan sprang into action. Dr. Weber, Harrison, and 2/3 of the critical materials would go through the evacuation tunnel, while Mueller would remain behind briefly to implement security protocols designed to slow the intruders' progress through the facility. Your priority is to intercept your sister, Harrison reminded Tank as they parted at the tunnel entrance. Keep her away from the Nexus team until we can ensure her safety. And if I can't convince her to come with me? Tank asked. Sarah hasn't spoken to me in years. She thinks I'm a homeless addict. Show her this, Dr. Weber said, handing him a small flash drive. It contains enough information to prove what we've told you, including documentation of the Continuity Initiative's true agenda and her company's unwitting involvement. Tank tucked the drive into his pocket. I'll do my best. Sieben will help, Dr. Weber said, kneeling to address the dog directly. Schutzien, Furien, Komzaruk Zuans. Protect him, guide him, come back to us. Sieben barked once in acknowledgement, pressing his head briefly against Dr. Weber's hand in farewell. With final instructions exchanged and emergency rendezvous points established, Tank and Sieben set out through a different exit, a narrow shaft that would bring them out near the main road where Sarah's survey team would arrive in the morning. The night was clear and cold, the mountain air sharp in Tank's lungs as they emerged from the facility. Sieben took point, his enhanced senses alert for any sign of the Nexus operatives. They moved swiftly but cautiously through the forest, using natural cover and the darkness to conceal their progress. By dawn, they had reached a vantage point overlooking the access road. Tank set up the compact binoculars Mueller had provided and settled in to wait. Sieben, a warm presence beside him. "What do you think, boy?" Tank murmured. "Will she listen to her homeless brother spouting conspiracy theories about immortality serums and secret Nazi scientists?" Sieben huffed softly, as if expressing skepticism. "Yeah, that's what I thought too." As the sun rose higher, Tank spotted the first vehicles approaching, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, moving in convoy up the winding mountain road. Through the binoculars, he could see armed men inside, Nexus security, establishing a perimeter for the survey team. An hour later, a second convoy appeared, 2 four-wheel drive vehicles with the Vermilion Development logo on their sides, and a larger truck carrying what appeared to be survey equipment. Tank focused the binoculars on the lead vehicle, and felt his heart skip a beat when he saw his sister in the passenger seat. Sarah Morrison looked much as he remembered, though more polished and professional. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun. "That's her," Tank told Sieben. "My sister Sarah." He and Sieben moved quickly into position, concealing themselves behind large boulders beside the road. As the first Vermilion vehicle rounded the bend, Tank stepped into the road and held up his hand. The driver slammed on the brakes, coming to a stop mere feet from where Tank stood. He saw Sarah's expression change from annoyance to shock as she recognized him. She rolled down her window, disbelief written across her features. "Tank? What the hell are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," he said urgently. "It's important." Sarah's shock gave way to anger. "I'm working, Tank. I'm heading up a major survey project. We haven't spoken in years, and you choose now to show up in the middle of nowhere." "It's about this project," Tank insisted. "You're in danger. The people you're working for, they're not who you think they are." Sarah's expression hardened. "Are you drunk? High? Is that what this is?" "I'm clean," Tank said firmly. "Have been for months." "Sarah, please, just give me 5 minutes." She glanced at her watch, then at the driver. 5 minutes. That's it. She stepped out of the vehicle, instructing the driver to wait. The second Vermilion vehicle pulled up behind them, but Sarah waved them to stay back. "You look different," she said. "I am different," Tank said. "Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. This survey project you're doing, it's a cover for something else. The company that hired Vermilion, Nexus Holdings, is actually a front for a group called the Continuity Initiative." Sarah's expression shifted to impatient disbelief. "What are you talking about? They're not interested in renewable energy." Tank continued urgently. "They're looking for a secret facility in these mountains, one that contains research that could extend human lifespans by centuries." "Oh my God," Sarah said, taking a step back. "You're delusional. I knew you had problems, but this is—" "Look at this," Tank interrupted, pulling out the flash drive. "Everything's on here, documentation, video evidence, the connection between Vermilion and Nexus, all of it." Sarah didn't take the drive. "Tank, you need help. Professional help. I don't know what conspiracy theory rabbit hole you've fallen down, but—" She broke off as Sieben emerged from the rocks behind Tank, moving to stand beside him. Sarah's eyes widened. Is that your dog?" "This is Sieben," Tank said. "He's part of this too. Sarah, I know how this sounds, but you have to trust me. The people you're working with, they've already sent armed operatives into these mountains. They breached the facility last night." "What facility?" she asked. Tank seized on this opening. "A research installation established during World War II. It houses technology and medical advancements that could change humanity forever. Dad knew about it, Sarah. He was part of it." "Dad? What does he have to do with this?" "He was their government liaison for years," Tank explained. "He knew about the research, the serum, all of it. He left me a letter explaining everything." Sarah stared at him, her professional composure cracking slightly. "Show me." Tank reached into his pocket for his father's letter, but before he could retrieve it, Sieben growled, his attention fixed on something beyond the vehicles. Tank turned to see a black SUV approaching rapidly from the direction of the facility. "Sarah, we need to go. Now." "I'm not going anywhere with you," she protested. "Not until you explain." "There's no time," Tank insisted, grabbing her arm. "Those men aren't here to help with your survey. They're here to secure the facility and eliminate anyone who knows too much." Sarah pulled away. "Stop it. You can't just appear after years of silence and expect me to—" Her words were cut short by the sound of gunfire. The approaching SUV had opened fire on the Vermilion vehicles, shattering windows and sending Sarah's colleagues diving for cover. "Get down!" Tank shouted, pulling Sarah behind the boulder where he and Sieben had been hiding. "What the hell is happening?" Sarah cried, her face pale with shock. "What I've been trying to tell you," Tank said grimly. "These people will kill anyone who gets in their way, including you and your survey team." From their position, Tank could see the Vermilion employees fleeing into the forest, pursued by armed men from the Nexus vehicle. The driver of Sarah's vehicle lay slumped over the steering wheel, apparently hit by the initial volley. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "Jeremy." She started to rise, but Tank pulled her back down. "You can't help him," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "We need to move, or we'll be next." The reality of their situation seemed to finally penetrate Sarah's shock. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear but her composure returning. "Where do we go?" "There's a path through the forest," Tank said, checking to ensure the Nexus operatives were occupied with the other Vermilion employees. "Sieben knows the way. We need to reach the evacuation point where the others will be waiting." "The others?" "I'll explain everything once we're safe," Tank promised. "Right now, we need to move." With Sieben leading the way, they slipped into the dense forest, leaving the chaos of the ambush behind. Tank kept Sarah close, guiding her through the rough terrain as quickly as possible. Behind them, they could hear shouts and occasional gunfire as the Nexus team secured the area. "This can't be happening," Sarah said. "This was supposed to be a routine survey for a renewable energy project. Wind turbines and solar arrays, for God's sake. That was never the real purpose," Tank said. "Sarah, those men back there, they work for an organization that's been searching for this facility for decades. They're willing to kill to get what's inside." "And what is inside?" she demanded. "What could possibly be worth all this?" "A serum that can extend human life by 2 centuries or more. The people who created it have been living in that facility since World War II, protecting it from misuse." Sarah stared at him. "You expect me to believe that?" "I've seen them," Tank insisted. "Spoke with them. The lead scientist is 128 years old but physically functions like someone in their 70s. The serum works, Sarah, and the Continuity Initiative wants it for themselves. The world's wealthiest and most powerful people, living for centuries while everyone else ages and dies normally. "They're following our trail," Tank whispered. "We need to move faster." They pressed on through the forest, climbing higher into the mountains. Tank could see that Sarah was struggling with the difficult terrain, her business attire and footwear hardly suitable for wilderness hiking. But to her credit, she pushed forward without complaint, the shock of the ambush having convinced her that whatever Tank's story, the danger was real. As they crossed a ridge, Tank's secure communicator vibrated. He pulled it out to find a text message from Captain Mueller. "Facility compromised. Weber and Harrison delayed. Proceed to secondary rendezvous. We'll meet you there." "What is it?" Sarah asked. "Change of plans," Tank said grimly. "The original evacuation route has been compromised. We need to head to the backup location." "And where is that?" "An old fire watchtower, about 3 miles from here. There's a helicopter pad." They adjusted their course, with Sieben once again taking point. The dog moved with absolute certainty, as if following a map only he could see. As they traveled, Tank tried to fill in more details for Sarah, explaining about Project Guardian, the defecting Nazi scientists, and the decades-long mission to protect the life extension serum from those who would misuse it. "This is insane," Sarah said. "If this is true, why would Dad keep it secret from us? Why not tell his own children?" "He was sworn to secrecy," Tank explained, "and he was protecting us. Knowledge of the serum makes you a target. But he told you—" "No," Tank corrected. "He left a letter to be given to me if I ever found my way to the facility. He'd been guiding me toward it my whole life, though I never knew it." "Guiding you? How?" Tank hesitated. "It's complicated, but he believed I was meant to continue his work, to become one of the Guardians protecting the serum." Sarah was silent for a long moment. "Is that why you two were always at odds? Why he pushed you so hard?" "Maybe," Tank admitted. "I never understood why he was so disappointed in my choices. Now I think he was trying to prepare me for something he couldn't explain." They fell silent as they climbed a particularly steep section of the mountainside. When they reached level ground again, Sarah asked the question Tank had been dreading. "If this serum really exists, have you taken it? Are you going to live for centuries?" "No," Tank said quietly. "I can't. My genetic profile, combined with my injuries from Iraq and the neurochemical changes from PTSD, I'm not compatible. The serum wouldn't work on me." "And that doesn't bother you? Knowing others might live for centuries while you age normally?" Tank considered this. "In a way, it's a relief. The burden of watching everyone you know grow old and die while you remain unchanged, I'm not sure I'd want that. And it makes me the perfect guardian, according to Dr. Weber. I can't be tempted by immortality because it's not an option." Before Sarah could respond, Sieben suddenly froze, hackles raised. A moment later, they heard the distinct sound of a helicopter approaching. "Is that your people?" Sarah asked hopefully. Tank shook his head, pulling her toward a dense stand of trees. "Our extraction isn't supposed to be by air. That's Nexus." They concealed themselves as the helicopter passed overhead, its searchlight sweeping the forest below. Tank could see men with tactical gear and weapons visible through the open door. "They're setting up a perimeter," he said grimly, "trying to box us in." "What do we do?" Sarah asked. "We keep moving. The watchtower is about 2 miles ahead. We just need to stay out of sight until we get there." "You said the dog is part of this too," she said finally. "What did you mean?" "Sieben was part of the original research program," Tank explained. "The canine subjects received a version of the serum that extended their lifespans and enhanced their intelligence. He's over 80 years old, Sarah." She stared at the German shepherd, who continued to lead them with unwavering confidence. "That's impossible." "I thought so too," Tank admitted. "But I've seen the records, the documentation. Sieben has been with Project Guardian since 1943. He's the last of the original dogs." Sarah shook her head in disbelief, but her eyes remained fixed on Sieben with new interest. "If what you're saying is true, this is beyond anything I could have imagined." "I know it sounds crazy," Tank said, "but you saw those men back on the road. They weren't just security for a survey team. They opened fire without warning, without provocation. Whatever you believe about the rest of it, you have to admit something bigger is happening here." Sarah nodded slowly. Vermilion was contracted for this project through unusual channels. The security protocols were extensive, even for a high-value development. And the survey parameters, they were oddly specific, focused on subsurface anomalies rather than typical environmental assessments. "They were looking for the facility," Tank confirmed, "using your company as legitimate cover." "That's it," Tank said. "The rendezvous point. We need to cross this clearing, but we'll be exposed." Sarah surveyed the open ground with a professional eye. "We should wait until dusk. Less visibility." Tank nodded, impressed by her tactical thinking. "Good idea." They found a concealed position at the edge of the clearing and settled into wait. Tank shared his water and the energy bars Mueller had provided, which Sarah accepted gratefully. "You've changed," she observed, studying him. "You seem focused, clear-headed." "Having a purpose helps," Tank said simply. "Taking care of Sieben gave me something to live for when I had nothing else. And now, this mission, protecting something that matters, it's like being back in the service, but for a cause I can believe in completely. I owe you an apology, Tank. What I said at Mom's funeral, about you being dead to me. I was angry and hurt, but I shouldn't have said it." "You had every right to be angry," Tank said. "I was a mess. The PTSD, the drinking, missing Mom's funeral. I failed you, failed the family. But I failed you too," Sarah admitted. "After you came back from Iraq, I didn't understand what you were going through. I expected you to just get over it. Go back to being the brother I remembered. When you couldn't, I gave up on you. We've both made mistakes," he said. "But right now, we need to focus on getting through this, on stopping the Continuity Initiative from getting their hands on the serum." Sarah nodded, her expression becoming more resolved. "So what's the plan once we reach the watchtower?" "Captain Mueller should be there with transportation to the final evacuation point," Tank explained. "From there, we'll rendezvous with Dr. Weber and Harrison, then proceed to the new facility location in Alaska." "And me? What happens to me in this plan?" Tank hesitated. "That's up to you. You could come with us, join the Guardians. Your skills would be valuable. Or we could set you up with a new identity, somewhere safe from the Continuity Initiative." Sarah looked surprised. "You'd let me choose?" "Of course," Tank said. "I'm not in the business of forcing people into lives they don't want." She seemed about to respond when Sieben suddenly went rigid, his attention fixed on the watchtower across the clearing. Tank followed his gaze and felt his heart sink. A Nexus helicopter was circling the tower, and he could see armed operatives already securing the structure. "They've found the rendezvous point," he said grimly. Sarah's face paled. "What do we do now?" Tank checked the secure communicator, finding a new message from Mueller. "Watchtower compromised. Proceed to tertiary location. Weber and Harrison under attack. Critical materials at risk." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. If Weber and Harrison were under attack, the serum and research materials could fall into the Continuity Initiative's hands. "Change of plans," Tank told Sarah. "We need to help Dr. Weber and Harrison. They're in trouble, and they have the serum with them." "Where are they?" Tank checked the coordinates Mueller had sent. "About 5 miles northwest of here. There's an old logging road they were going to use for extraction." Sarah looked toward the watchtower, then back at Tank. "We'll never make it in time on foot, not with Nexus patrolling the area." "We need a vehicle," Tank agreed. "I have an idea. The Nexus team that attacked us, they left their vehicles by the road, If we can circle back, maybe we can. Appropriate one. Tank stared at his sister with newfound respect. That's risky. So is sitting here waiting to be captured, Sarah pointed out. I may be a corporate executive now, but I grew up with you and Dad. I know how to hotwire a car. Tank couldn't help but smile. The sister he remembered, resourceful and bold, was still there beneath the professional exterior. All right, he agreed. We circle back, grab a vehicle, and make for Weber and Harrison's position. As they traveled, Tank filled Sarah in on more details about Project Guardian and the Continuity Initiative. With each revelation, he could see her skepticism giving way to grim understanding. If what you're saying is true, she said finally, this serum could completely destabilize society. Imagine dictators living for centuries or billionaires accumulating wealth across multiple lifetimes. Exactly why the Guardians have protected it for so long. Tank agreed. The question isn't whether humans should live longer, it's who gets to decide who lives longer and who controls the supply. They fell silent as they approached the road, moving with extreme caution. In the fading light, Tank could make out 2 vehicles still parked where the ambush had occurred. The bodies of Sarah's colleagues had been removed, but there was no sign of Nexus operatives. They've established a perimeter and moved on, Tank whispered, probably concentrating their forces around the facility and the watchtower. Sarah nodded, her face grim but determined. Let's get a vehicle and go help your friends. They moved quickly but cautiously down to the road. The first vehicle had been damaged in the firefight, but the second appeared operational. Sarah approached it, checking for keys. No luck, she reported. I'll have to hotwire it. Tank kept watch with Sieben while Sarah worked beneath the dashboard. After a tense few minutes, the engine roared to life. Still got it, Sarah said with grim satisfaction. They piled in, with Tank at the wheel and Sieben in the back seat. Using the coordinates from Mueller, they set off along the mountain roads, driving without headlights to avoid detection. What's the plan when we reach Weber and Harrison? Sarah asked. Depends on the situation, Tank replied. Best case, we help them secure the serum and research materials, then all escape to the tertiary extraction point. Worst case, we destroy the serum, Sarah finished for him, to keep it out of the wrong hands. Yes, Dr. Weber gave me instructions on how to neutralize the compounds if capture seemed imminent. Could you do it? Destroy something that could extend human life by centuries? Tank considered the question carefully. If the alternative is letting it fall into the hands of people who would use it solely for power and control, yes. Better that humanity continues its normal lifespan than live under the thumb of immortal tyrants. The logging road Mueller had indicated was barely visible in the growing darkness, little more than a rutted path through the trees. Tank navigated it as best he could, the SUV bouncing over roots and rocks. We should be getting close, he said. Suddenly, Sieben barked sharply from the back seat, alert and tense. What is it, boy? Tank asked, slowing the vehicle. The answer came a moment later as they rounded a bend in the road. Ahead, illuminated by the last rays of sunset, was a chaotic scene. A large truck, presumably the Guardian's transport vehicle, was stopped in the middle of the road, surrounded by armed Nexus operatives. Dr. Weber and Harrison were visible, kneeling with their hands behind their heads as the operatives searched the truck. We're too late, Sarah whispered. Tank quickly reversed the SUV back around the bend, concealing them from view. Not necessarily. They haven't left yet, which means they're still searching for something. The serum? Probably. Weber would have hidden it, not kept it in an obvious location. Tank studied the situation through his binoculars. There were 8 Nexus operatives that he could see. Weber and Harrison were under guard, but appeared unharmed. Mueller was nowhere to be seen. We need a distraction, Tank said, formulating a plan. Something to draw some of them away while we deal with the rest. Sarah pointed to a steep slope above the road. What about a landslide or rockfall? That part of the road is right below an unstable area. Tank examined the slope. That could work, but we'd need to trigger it somehow. The SUV has a winch, Sarah pointed out. If we could attach it to one of those larger boulders and pull. Tank nodded. Good thinking. But we'll need to be careful about timing. And once we create the distraction, we'll need to move fast. They positioned the SUV on a small service path above the main road, concealing it as best they could. Using the winch cable, Tank secured it to a large boulder perched precariously on the slope. When I activate the winch, the boulder should start a chain reaction, Tank explained. The noise and debris will draw some of the operatives to investigate. When they do, I'll move in from the west side of the road. Sarah, you stay with the vehicle. If things go wrong, get out of here. I'm not leaving you, Sarah insisted. Someone needs to survive to warn the world about the Continuity Initiative, Tank argued. If Weber, Harrison, and I are captured or killed, you're the only one who knows the truth. Fine. But be careful. Always, Tank assured her. He knelt to address Sieben. "You ready for this, boy?" The dog's intelligent eyes met his, and Tank felt a surge of confidence. Whatever happened, he wasn't facing it alone. With Sarah at the wheel ready to activate the winch, Tank and Sieben made their way through the forest to a position offering a clear view of the Nexus operatives and their captives. Tank checked his borrowed handgun. Not much against 8 armed professionals, but it would have to do. The real advantage would be surprise and confusion. He raised the secure communicator to signal Sarah. "Ready." Moments later, the sound of grinding metal echoed through the forest as the winch activated. The boulder shifted, then broke free, tumbling down the slope and triggering the anticipated landslide. Rocks and debris cascaded onto the road about 50 yards from the truck, creating a thunderous distraction. As expected, several of the Nexus operatives immediately moved toward the commotion, weapons raised. Tank counted 4 remaining with Weber and Harrison. "Now or never," Tank whispered to Sieben. "Let's go." Tank moved silently through the underbrush, Sieben at his side, approaching the remaining Nexus operatives from behind. In the confusion of the landslide, with attention focused on the massive debris flow now blocking the road, he had a brief window of opportunity. Dr. Weber, still kneeling under guard, spotted him in the shadows. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes conveyed recognition. Tank assessed the situation quickly. 2 operatives were examining the landslide, 2 were guarding Weber and Harrison, and the remaining 4 were still searching the truck. The odds weren't good, but surprise was on his side. He gestured to Sieben, using hand signals from their training sessions at the facility. The dog understood immediately, moving into position for the coordinated attack they had practiced. Tank counted down silently. 3, 2, 1. Sieben burst from the underbrush with a ferocious growl, launching himself at the nearest guard. Simultaneously, Tank emerged from cover, firing 2 precise shots that disabled the second guard's weapon without hitting the man himself. The moment of surprise gave Weber and Harrison the opening they needed. Despite their apparent age, both moved with astonishing speed and coordination. Weber rolled away from her guard, while Harrison executed a perfect sweep kick that took his captor's legs out from under him. The operatives at the landslide spun around at the commotion, raising their weapons. Tank ducked behind the truck for cover as bullets pinged off the metal. Sieben had already subdued his target and moved to help Harrison, who was grappling with his guard. Weber reached Tank's position. "The serum is secure," she said quickly. "Hidden compartment under the driver's seat. We need to neutralize these operatives and leave immediately." "Where's Mueller?" Tank asked, returning fire carefully to keep the approaching operatives at bay. "He stayed behind at the facility to implement the self-destruct protocols. He was supposed to meet us here." Tank understood the implication. Mueller had likely been captured or killed. "Sarah's waiting with a vehicle," Tank told her. "But we're pinned down here. We need to clear a path." Harrison joined them behind the truck, his guard now unconscious. "The truck is damaged," he reported. "They shot out the engine when they ambushed us. We won't be driving out of here." Suddenly, the sound of an engine roaring to life cut through the gunfire. The SUV Sarah had been waiting in burst onto the road, heading straight for the Nexus operatives. The men scattered as Sarah swerved the vehicle, coming to a stop between the truck and the attackers, providing temporary cover. "Get in!" Sarah shouted through the open window. Weber looked at Harrison. "The serum." Harrison nodded and sprinted to the truck cab, reaching under the driver's seat to retrieve a small metal case. Meanwhile, Weber grabbed a laptop case from the scattered equipment, presumably containing the research files. Tank provided covering fire as Weber and Harrison made their way to the SUV. Sieben remained at Tank's side, growling at the operatives. "Go," Tank called to Sarah as Weber and Harrison climbed into the vehicle. "I'll cover you." "We're not leaving without you," Sarah insisted. "Sieben, go with them," Tank ordered, pointing to the SUV. The dog didn't move, standing firm beside him. "Stubborn as always," Tank muttered. He fired his last few rounds, forcing the operatives to take cover, then made a dash for the SUV, Sieben at his heels. As Tank reached for the door handle, a shot rang out from the trees. Pain exploded in his shoulder as the bullet found its mark. He stumbled, nearly falling, but Sarah reached out and pulled him into the vehicle. "Drive!" Harrison shouted as bullets peppered the SUV's exterior. Sarah slammed the accelerator, and the vehicle lurched forward, bouncing over the rough terrain as they fled the ambush site. In the back seat, Dr. Weber was already examining Tank's wound. "Clean through, and through," she assessed. "You're fortunate. Here, apply pressure." She pressed a folded cloth against his shoulder, and Tank winced at the pain. Sieben pushed his head under Tank's good arm, offering silent support. "Where to?" Sarah asked, navigating the logging road at dangerous speed. "There's a small airstrip about 20 miles northeast," Harrison directed. "We have a plane waiting. It's our final extraction point." Sarah nodded, concentrating on the difficult driving. What about the men following us? They'll have vehicles too. We have a head start, Weber said, and the landslide will slow them down. But we need to assume they've called for backup. Tank's mind was racing. What about Mueller? We can't just leave him. Weber's expression was grim. Captain Mueller knew the risks. His final communication indicated he had initiated the facility's self-destruct sequence. If he hasn't reached us by now, she didn't need to finish the thought. Mueller had likely sacrificed himself to ensure the facility's secrets wouldn't fall into enemy hands. The serum? Tank asked. Secure, Harrison confirmed. The last complete supply from the facility. Without the mineral compound from the mountain, it can't be replicated at scale. But we saved enough for a limited continuation of the project. Tank leaned back, the adrenaline beginning to wear off as shock set in. So we won then? The continuity initiative can't get what they want? Not completely, Weber said, checking his wound again. They've breached the facility, and while the self-destruct will destroy much of the research, they may still recover fragments, enough to pursue their own version of the serum, given time and resources. Which they have in abundance, Harrison added grimly. Sarah navigated a particularly treacherous curve, the SUV's tires skidding on loose gravel. So this isn't over? No, Weber confirmed. It's just changing form. Instead of protecting a static facility, we'll now be monitoring their activities, countering their research, ensuring they don't succeed where we did. They drove in tense silence for several miles, the forest darkness broken only by the SUV's headlights. Sieben remained vigilant, ears pricked for any sign of pursuit. Tank felt himself drifting in and out of consciousness, the blood loss taking its toll despite Weber's first aid. Stay with us, Tank, Sarah said. We're almost there. I'm fine, Tank mumbled. The airstrip is just ahead, Harrison announced. Dr. Weber, prepare the serum case for transport. We'll need to move quickly once we arrive. Weber nodded, securing the metal case in a specialized carrying harness. The plane is fueled and ready? Coordinates for the Alaska facility programmed? Everything's set, Harrison confirmed. Our contact there is expecting us within 12 hours. Tank forced himself to focus, fighting against the encroaching darkness. Sarah, he said, you need to decide. Are you coming with us, or do you want us to set you up somewhere safe? Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. After what I've seen, after what they did to my colleagues, I'm coming with you. These people need to be stopped. Despite his pain, Tank felt a surge of pride in his sister's courage. The Morrison's stubborn streak, their father would have called it. The trees thinned, revealing a small clearing ahead with a rudimentary airstrip, little more than a flattened strip of earth with some basic lighting. A twin-engine plane waited, its pilot visible in the cockpit, ready for immediate departure. We made it, Sarah breathed. As they approached, the pilot flashed the landing lights in recognition. Weber began gathering their critical supplies, preparing for the quick transfer to the aircraft. Help Tank, she instructed Sarah. He's lost blood and needs immediate medical attention. Sarah parked near the plane and rushed around to Tank's door, helping him out with Harrison's assistance. Sieben stayed close, clearly concerned about his wounded companion. They had covered half the distance to the plane when the distant sound of helicopter rotors shattered the night's quiet. Nexus, Harrison said grimly. They've called in air support. We need to move faster, Weber urged, hurrying toward the plane with the serum case. Tank stumbled, nearly falling despite Sarah and Harrison's support. Go, he said weakly. Get the serum on that plane. I'll catch up. We're not leaving you, Sarah insisted, tightening her grip on him. The helicopter's searchlight appeared in the distance, sweeping the forest as it approached the airstrip. They had minutes, perhaps seconds, before they were spotted. Weber reached the plane first, handing the serum case to the pilot before turning back to help the others. We won't all make it, Tank realized, his tactical training cutting through the pain and blood loss. Not before that helicopter arrives. Weber's expression confirmed his assessment. We need a distraction, something to buy us time. I'll do it, Tank said immediately. Give me a weapon. I'll hold them off while you get the plane in the air. Absolutely not, Sarah snapped. We're staying together. The helicopter was closing in rapidly, its searchlight now visible through the trees at the edge of the clearing. Once it spotted them, they would be exposed, vulnerable. There must be another way, Weber said, looking around desperately. Sieben suddenly moved away from Tank's side, standing alert several yards away, facing the approaching helicopter. A low growl emanated from deep in his chest. Sieben? Weber called, concerned. The dog looked back at them, meeting Tank's eyes with that uncanny intelligence. In that moment, Tank understood what Sieben intended. No, he whispered. Sieben, stay. But the dog had already made his decision. With one last look at Tank, a look that conveyed more than words ever could, Sieben turned and raced toward the forest edge, barking loudly to draw attention away from the plane. What is he doing? Sarah asked, bewildered. Creating a diversion, Weber explained, her voice thick with emotion. He's leading them away from us. The helicopter's searchlight immediately swung toward the source of the barking, following Sieben as he dashed along the tree line, deliberately visible. Now's our chance, Harrison urged. We need to go while they're distracted. Tank stared after Sieben. We can't leave him. He's giving us the time we need, Weber said gently. He knows exactly what he's doing, Tank. This is his choice. With agonizing reluctance, Tank allowed Sarah and Harrison to guide him toward the waiting plane. Weber had already started the engines, preparing for immediate takeoff. As they reached the aircraft, Tank looked back one last time. In the distance, he could see Sieben still leading the helicopter on a chase away from the airstrip, the dog's movements precise and purposeful despite the danger. Good boy, Sieben, Tank whispered. Good boy. They secured the door, and Weber immediately began taxiing for takeoff. Through the window, Tank watched as the helicopter continued following Sieben, its searchlight fixed on the running dog. Will he be okay? Sarah asked. Sieben has been showing signs of his age in recent months, Weber said carefully. The enhanced biology that has sustained him for 8 decades has been failing. We suspected he had perhaps a year left at most. He knew, Tank realized, his voice breaking. He knew he was dying and he chose to go out protecting us. Weber nodded, a true guardian to the end. The plane accelerated down the rough airstrip, lifting off just as gunfire erupted in the distance. Tank pressed his face to the window, straining to catch a final glimpse of Sieben, but the dog had disappeared into the forest. As they gained altitude, leaving the mountain and its secrets behind, Tank felt an overwhelming mixture of emotions. Grief for Sieben and Mueller, worry about the future, determination to continue their mission, and a strange sense of peace that he had finally found his purpose. What happens now? Sarah asked. Dr. Weber, piloting the plane with the skill of someone who had been flying for decades, glanced back at them. We established the new facility in Alaska. Continue guarding the serum and developing protocols for its eventual controlled release to humanity. Eventual release? Tank questioned. I thought the whole point was to keep it secret. Secret from those who would misuse it, Weber clarified. But not forever. The ultimate goal has always been to develop a way to share this gift responsibly, equitably. Perhaps not in our lifetimes, but someday. And until then? Sarah asked. Until then, we guard it, Harrison said simply. We monitor the Continuity Initiative's activities. We prepare for the day when humanity is ready for this advancement. Tank nodded, understanding dawning. This was what his father had been preparing him for all along. Not just to protect a secret, but to help guide humanity toward a future where such a gift could be shared without causing chaos or tyranny. I'm in, he said firmly. Whatever it takes. Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand. We're in, she corrected. Family sticks together, right? Tank smiled weakly, feeling the blood loss taking its toll again. Right. As he drifted toward unconsciousness, Tank's last thoughts were of Sieben, the loyal guardian who had found him when he was at his lowest. Thank you, old friend, Tank whispered. 6 months later, the Alaskan wilderness stretched out beneath a perfect blue sky, mountains and forests covered in pristine snow that sparkled in the morning sunlight. Tank stood on the observation deck of the new facility, breathing in the crisp, clean air, his breath forming clouds in the cold. His shoulder had healed well, thanks to Dr. Weber's skilled medical attention. The physical therapy had been grueling, but necessary to regain full range of motion. The new facility was smaller than the original, but more modern and secure. Built into the side of a remote Alaskan mountain, it housed the research labs, living quarters, and the precious remaining supply of the life extension serum. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than a research station studying Arctic wildlife, a cover story that allowed for legitimate supply deliveries and occasional visitors without raising suspicion. Beautiful morning, Sarah said, joining him on the deck. 6 months in Alaska had changed her as well, her corporate polish replaced by a more practical demeanor, her designer clothes exchanged for warm, functional attire suited to their remote location. The best kind, Tank agreed. Clear visibility for miles. Good day for the new arrivals. Hard to believe it's been 6 months already. Sometimes I still can't wrap my head around all of this. Tank understood the feeling. There were moments when it all seemed like a dream. The discovery of the facility in Montana, the revelations about their father, the harrowing escape, and now their new life as guardians of humanity's most closely guarded secret. Any word from the tracking team, he asked. Sarah checked her tablet. Rodriguez reports that the Continuity Initiative has established a research facility in Switzerland. They're clearly trying to replicate the serum from whatever fragments they salvaged from Montana. And Dr. Weber's assessment? She says they're years, possibly decades away from success. The mineral compound is the key component they're missing. The sound of an approaching helicopter drew their attention, right on schedule. "That's them," Tank said. "Let's go welcome our new colleagues." They made their way down from the observation deck to the landing pad, where Dr. Weber and Harrison were already waiting. Weber, remarkably spry despite her chronological age of 128, Harrison had taken charge of security, designing protocols and systems to protect the facility without drawing unwanted attention. The helicopter touched down, its rotors stirring up a small blizzard of snow. As the engines wound down, the side door slid open, and the first of the new Guardians emerged. Miguel Torres, former Navy SEAL with expertise in remote operations. Anna Chen, brilliant biochemist who had grown disillusioned with corporate pharmaceutical research. James Wilson, cybersecurity expert who had once worked for the NSA. All veterans, all carefully vetted, all people with skills the Guardian Project needed. "Welcome to Project Guardian," Tank greeted them as they approached. "Thank you for accepting our invitation." The new arrivals looked around with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty, much as Tank himself had felt upon first entering the original facility. "You'll have questions," he acknowledged. "Many questions, and we'll answer them all. But first, there's someone I'd like you to meet." Tank turned and whistled sharply. From the facility entrance, a German Shepherd puppy came bounding through the snow, all enthusiasm and energy. At 3 months old, he was already showing the distinctive size and intelligence of his predecessor. "This is Max," Tank said as the puppy reached them, circling the newcomers excitedly. "He's the first of our new Guardian dogs. Enhanced intelligence, extended lifespan, though not quite to the extent Sieben achieved. Dr. Weber has refined the process." The new Guardians watched in fascination as Max sat at Tank's command, alert and attentive despite his puppy exuberance. "Inside, you'll learn everything about Project Guardian, its history, its purpose, and your roles in its future," Tank continued. "You'll be offered the choice to join us fully, which includes the serum treatment for those who are compatible. Or you can walk away, with no consequences beyond having your memories of this place gently modified. We would prefer you stay, of course," Sarah added with a smile. "Before we go inside," Tank said, "I want to be clear about one thing. Project Guardian isn't about hoarding power or playing God. It's about responsible stewardship of a discovery that could transform humanity, for better or worse. Our job is to ensure it's for the better, even if that means waiting generations before the world is ready." "And if we disagree with that assessment?" Anna Chen asked. "Then we want to hear your perspective." Tank replied honestly. "We don't claim to have all the answers, but we do have the experience and wisdom of people who have been considering these questions for nearly 8 decades. This seemed to satisfy them for the moment, and Tank led the group inside, Max trotting happily at his heels. As they walked, Harrison fell into step beside him. "They remind me of you," the older man observed quietly. "When you first arrived at the Montana facility, skeptical but intrigued, cautious but hopeful." Tank smiled. "Let's hope they adapt as quickly as I did." "You had Sieben to guide you," Harrison reminded him. The mention of Sieben still brought a pang of grief, though it had softened with time. They had never found any trace of the dog after their escape, but Tank preferred to believe Sieben had found a peaceful place in the forest to complete his long journey, rather than falling to Nexus bullets. They reached the main conference room, where Dr. Weber had prepared a presentation on Project Guardian's history and mission. As the newcomers took their seats, Tank moved to the front of the room, Max settling at his feet. "Before Dr. Weber begins," Tank said, "I want to share something my father wrote to me before he died. Something that helps explain why we're all here." He unfolded the now familiar letter, though he didn't need to read it. The words were engraved in his memory. He said, "The work being done at the facility is of vital importance to humanity's future. The Guardians need someone like you, someone with training, courage, and the moral compass to make impossible choices." Tank looked at each of the new recruits in turn. "That's why you were selected, not just for your skills, but for your character." He paused, letting his words sink in. "This isn't just a job or a mission, it's a calling, one that may span decades of your lives if you choose to accept it." As Dr. Weber began her presentation, Tank stepped back, watching the reactions of the newcomers. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to fascination to cautious acceptance. Sarah joined him at the back of the room, Max now curled up between them. "You're good at this," she whispered. "The leadership role suits you." Tank shrugged modestly. "I'm just passing on what I've learned. From Weber, from Harrison, from Sieben, and from Dad," Sarah added. Tank nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Their father had been preparing them for this, in his own way. Tank's military training, Sarah's organizational and business skills, all proving valuable in their new roles. As Dr. Weber continued explaining the history of Project Guardian from its origins in World War II to the present day, Tank reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just 7 months. From a homeless veteran with no future to the leader of humanity's most important secret project, from isolated and hopeless to connected and purposeful. Max stirred at his feet, looking up at Tank with trusting eyes. Not Sieben, but a worthy successor in his own right. The continuation of a legacy that stretched back to 1943 and would extend far into the future. "We should check the perimeter sensors after this," Tank murmured to Sarah. "Last night's storm might have affected the calibration." She nodded, already making a note on her tablet. The mundane details of maintaining their secret facility were a constant part of their lives now. As the presentation concluded and the questions began, Tank felt a sense of optimism that had been absent for most of his adult life. The path ahead would not be easy. The continuity initiative remained a threat. The ethical questions surrounding the serum were complex, and the responsibility they carried was immense. But he was no longer facing these challenges alone. He had Sarah, Weber, Harrison, and soon, these new recruits. He had Max, young and untested but full of potential, and he had purpose. As one of the recruits asked a particularly insightful question about the serum's properties, Tank exchanged a pleased glance with Dr. Weber. The future of Project Guardian looked promising indeed. Outside, the Alaskan wilderness stretched vast and beautiful under the clear blue sky, a fitting home for their mission. Remote, pristine, enduring, like the Guardians themselves, standing watch over a secret that could transform humanity, waiting for the day when the world would be ready for such a gift. Until then, they would guard, they would prepare, they would endure.